Gospel songs are very popular in many Protestant hymnals, both mainstream and evangelical. Now, what you think of gospel music is actually a 20th century innovation when hymns fused with country music and African American traditions like ragtime, blues, and jazz. However, the origins actually lie in the mid-1800s during a period of religious fervor called the Third Great Awakening. In this episode, we will look at the origins of this movement, particularly the contributions of female poets and musicians.
Earlier episodes have mentioned precursors to this movement, periods of reawakening and activism. The First Great Awakening came from Britain to the American colonies. Dramatic preaching like that of George Whitefield, a friend of the Wesley brothers, launched the first wave of fervent piety in North America. It was followed by another era of camp meetings and the resulting folk songs. Historians point to yet another period in American and Canadian history, one of meetings and revivals, but for the urban world. The so-called Gilded Age brought newfound prosperity to some, but shed light on the many groups who did not receive it. Issues like women's suffrage, child labor laws, destitution, and temperance were tackled head-on by mainstream and evangelical denominations. We see this materialized in movements like Chautauqua across rural America, and the social gospel, which hit both the United States and Canada. This era also witnessed the start of new denominations like Christian Science, Jehovah's Witnesses, Nazarenes, and Pentecostals. Like today, music was an important way of spreading the gospel message, both in meetings and wider society. Here is a hymnal specifically for the gospel temperance movement, which organized prayer meetings to convert wayward men. American gospel music appeared around the time of the Civil War, accompanying sermons of evangelical preachers like Dwight L. Moody, based in Chicago. Moody was a charismatic preacher who toured America and Britain with spectacles that drew huge crowds. His dynamic sermons were made all the more convincing with songs of Philip Bliss and Ira D. Sankey, both of whom toured with Moody. Together, they published huge volumes of songs that were performed or first improvised at these meetings. We see the earliest uses of the term gospel music in the mid-1800s, and as its name suggests, it was music that spread the gospel message. One of the earliest American publications is Philip Bliss's Gospel Songs of 1874. It contained music for meetings, Sunday school, and domestic entertainment. Publishing houses exploded the versatility and demand of this genre, giving birth to a gospel industry. The melodies are tuneful and singable, made memorable by repeating rhythmic units. Harmonies resemble those of popular ballads from that time. Texts are often in the first person, as if the singer is the narrator of the poem. They are often testimonies of religious conversion, persuasion to conversion, warnings of vices, and call to action, often with militaristic imagery. Some melodies resemble standard church hymns, but most are structured into verses and a chorus. The chorus of Bliss's "It Is Well With My Soul" is a perfect example. The soprano starts the refrain while altos, tenors, and basses echo them. This call-and-response structure most likely came from African American spirituals, and we see it all over gospel music. Here are some popular hymns from this era. Some of these originated outside of America, like England and Ireland. While all the names here are men, a large portion of this repertoire actually comes from women throughout the English-speaking world. Civilla D. Martin was born in Nova Scotia and later moved to the United States, where she met her husband, a Disciples of Christ minister. Martin once told the following story. The couple was vacationing in New York one year, and they met an old couple named the Doolittles. Both were very frail and sick, but Martin was amazed by their constant cheerfulness and Christian devotion. When Martin's husband questioned the couple, Mrs. Doolittle responded, "His eye is on the sparrow, and I know he watches me." The next day, Civilla mailed a poem to the composer Charles H. Gabriel, and the hymn quickly became famous. Mary Ann Thompson was born in England and also moved to America. Her most popular hymn is O Zion Haste. Most of it was written while sitting up one night with her sick child. She wanted to write a missionary hymn to Henry Smart's tune for Hark, Hark, My Soul. Later, she confessed that she couldn't think of a good refrain at the time and finished the poem about 3 years later. She also admitted that she never heard the hymn sung to the tune for which she wrote it, this one by Henry Smart. Rather, the British composer James Welch made a brand new tune for her text, and she approved. Elizabeth Prentiss was a prolific American poet and novelist. Shortly after her and her pastor husband moved to New York City, she lost her 4-year-old son in January and newborn daughter in April. 4 years later, in 1856, she almost lost her daughter Minnie. During this suffering, she turned to the story of Jacob's dream and found inspiration in Sarah Adams' hymn, Nearer My God to Thee, also inspired by the Genesis story. From this came More Love to Thee. Apparently, she did not think very highly of it and kept it secret until she published it 13 years later. We all know the American Robert Lowry, a Baptist preacher and prolific songwriter. His melodies include How Can I Keep From Singing and Shall We Gather at the River. Now, Lowry had a parishioner who was already an established poet. Lowry encouraged Annie Sherwood Hawkes to write a few hymns, all of which he would set to music. I Need Thee Every Hour was first sung at a Cincinnati Sunday School convention in 1872. This hymn was cherished by another female poet, Mary Baker Eddy, founder of the Church of Christ Scientist. Her personal copy of the first Christian Science hymnal bears the annotation, I had this hymn sung at the funeral of my husband, Asa G. Eddy. In fact, Eddy requested that many other hymns by women go into the church's hymnal. Her copy in the Mary Baker Eddy Library bears copious annotations, and many gospel hymns by women are marked with her enthusiastic approval. Eddy also contributed hymns for the Christian Science Church. 7 of her poems were arranged into various hymns in the 1898 hymnal. Perhaps the most prolific songwriter of this era was Fanny Crosby. She wrote almost 9,000 gospel songs. Scholars think she had over 200 pseudonyms because publishers were hesitant to publish so many songs by one person in a hymnal. As a child, she loved listening to hymns, calling it a refreshment to my young soul. It was then that she decided to write hymns for others to sing. She never let blindness get in her way. In fact, she often spoke of it as a blessing. The very first lines of her autobiography read, It seemed intended by the blessed providence of God that I should be blind all my life, and I thank him for the dispensation. She later became a staunch advocate for better education for the blind, even traveling to Washington to speak with politicians. These are just some of her songs, many still sung across the English-speaking world. Blessed Assurance is an example in which both words and music were written by women. Crosby collaborated with a close friend in Manhattan, Phoebe P. Knapp. Knapp was the daughter of Phoebe Palmer, one of the founders of the Holiness movement. Apparently, Knapp once played a brand new melody of hers on the piano and asked Fanny what it said to her. Out of the blue, Fanny responded, Blessed Assurance, Jesus is mine. Crosby went on to write many hymns tied to her work in city missions. She dedicated much of her life to helping immigrants, the poor, and the blind. Her public speeches and specially crafted songs went hand in hand with her Christian vocation. Now, these women are just some of the many gospel songwriters. Some hymns have fallen out of use in mainstream Protestant hymnals, but they were immensely popular from their creation to about the mid-20th century. This was not just a North American phenomenon. Emotive missionary songs were popular across the United Kingdom, and it didn't take long for them to make their way into Protestant hymnals everywhere. So now let's sing a transatlantic collaboration. Catherine Hankey was an English missionary and nurse. While on a mission in South Africa, Hankey became very ill. She wrote a long poem on the life of Jesus during her recuperation. From the second part of the poem came I Love to Tell the Story. It soon caught the attention of the American William G. Fisher. Fisher was music director for many revival meetings around Philadelphia, and he composed about 200 gospel hymns. He added a refrain and wrote the melody we all know today.